Who is on the chopping block for your Carolina Panthers this offseason? That's what we're discussing on this edition of Panthers Today by Chat Sports. We're breaking down the top 5 cut candidates for Carolina, and then in the back half of today's show, we'll also break down 5 surprise cut candidates from around the rest of the NFL that the Panthers could sign in free agency in just a couple of weeks. Before we dive into all that and more, make sure you are subscribed to the channel. We're uploading free Panthers content all season long. Things are getting very close to actually breaking in the NFL in terms of free agency, the draft, more off-season activities. So I want you guys to be a part of it here on the channel. Go down below, hit that subscribe button, and turn your notifications on as well. Help us hit our next milestone of 2,500 subs. All right, so first cut candidate on the list, the Red Rocket. Andy Dalton. The cut of Andy Dalton would save the Carolina Panthers $2 million. That's what we're really doing, right? We don't want to see any of these guys go, but if the Panthers are going to open up some money for free agency this offseason, somebody is going to have to get the boot. Andy Dalton could be one of them here. It doesn't save too much money, and honestly, cutting Andy Dalton isn't exactly a move that you're doing to save money per se. The reason you would cut Andy Dalton is because you want to bring some new life into that QB room. You want to bring some new blood, maybe some younger talent into there to give Bryce Young a bit of competition. Just somebody to have that provides a different skill set per se than a guy in Andy Dalton who's going to be 40 years old, right? Like he's 1-6 as a starter in Carolina. If Bryce Young were to go down, how much can you really rely upon Andy Dalton here? Remember, he had to play against the Buffalo Bills this past season and couldn't hang at all. So maybe the Panthers would want to bring in somebody who provides a little bit more juice than Andy Dalton at this point in his career. And we've heard Dan Morgan talk about the backup quarterback situation and what he wants to see in that room potentially this offseason. He said that I think we have to explore every option, whether in free agency or the draft, and get some young, more developmental guys. And ideally, they're athletic, so they can run around, escape, makes plays with their legs, because that's the way the league is trending nowadays. So yeah, we'll explore every avenue there. Okay. We'll see. That messaging there from Dan Morgan tells me Andy Dalton's not going to be a part of this team in 2026. He's also a trade candidate as well. It would save $2.2 million, so an additional $200,000 that you would save if you could find a trade partner for him. There's a chance that some team around the league, maybe the Bengals in their backup quarterback situation, might want to bring back an old friend in Andy Dalton. I would go out there and peruse the league for a trade first, but if there's nothing out there, I wouldn't mind cutting him either. As far as some draft quarterbacks that could be selected by Carolina late in the 2026 NFL Draft, Taylen Green from Arkansas and then Haynes from Georgia Tech are just two players who kind of fit that mold that Morgan is looking for here. Athletic, they can run around, make plays with their legs. That's all Haynes did in Georgia Tech. So maybe they end up taking a flyer on one of these two guys, and they go a little bit younger in that backup QB role. Next up on the list for cut candidates for the Carolina Panthers, Tommy Tremble. I feel like this is where I might lose a couple of you guys here because Tommy Tremble is absolutely a fan favorite, but he saves $6 million if you were to cut ties with him this offseason. Look, if there's one thing I know that Tommy Tremble does really, really well, it's run blocking. He did take a step up in terms of his receiving game this past season, a career high in catches and yards and catch percentage and all that good stuff. So he has gotten better, but when you could save $6 million and the Panthers only have $12 million already to work with in cap space, and keep in mind, you got to spend about $10 million to sign your draft class, you got to free up some money some way, somehow, and Tommy Tremble getting cut is one of the ways to go out there and do that. And I've also thought about the Panthers being able to replace a guy who is going to cost for $6 million against the cap this year, or you could save $6 million on if you cut him, and you can find a run-blocking tight end late in the draft if you wanted to address that there. The means for cutting him mean more than keeping him on this team, in my opinion. But there's some people out there who think that Tommy Tremble could actually be an extension candidate for the Carolina Panthers. Joe Person said this via The Athletic. Tremble signed a 2-year, $10.5 million extension last offseason that matched Mike Jackson's, and their situations are similar. Tremble's season wasn't as splashy as Jackson's, but the third-round pick from 2021 set career highs with 27 catches, 249 receiving yards, and a 73.0 catch percentage. After missing training camp following back surgery in May, Tremble returned to play all 17 games, and he remains the Panthers' best blocking tight end and is well-liked in the locker room. He could be in line for another raise. So if the Panthers were to go out there and extend Tommy Tremble, per se, they could save $3.4 million. It would be about a $2.6 million difference, versus cutting him for $6 million flat. So I guess for 2026's sake, it would maybe make sense to extend Tommy Tremble, but I wouldn't mind if they cut him and saved a little bit more money as well. Before we move on to the rest of the people on the list, if you want the Panthers to make a splash in free agency, because that's what we're doing, right? We're cutting these players so the Panthers can spend big in the open market. If you want the Panthers to make an absolute splash in free agency, manifest it for me. Go down below and hit that thumbs up icon like today's video. All right, next up on the cut candidates list, Patrick Jones II. This cut would save $4.75 million. Again, the Panthers don't have a ton of guys who they can just cut off the roster and shed, $10, $15 million of cap. They don't have a ton of those names. So Patrick Jones is going to be another guy who I believe will be a cap casualty this offseason because you save close to $5 million. And in his lone season in Carolina, I get it. He didn't really get off the ground a ton. He suffered a season-ending herniated disc in Week 6 and didn't really get a bunch of burn before that. I just think it wasn't the best overall investment by Carolina here, signing him to a whatever it was, like 3-year, $21 million deal. Like it was a miss by Dan Morgan there in the edge rusher's room. Tried to get a good guy for a value, and it just didn't really work out here. And look, I was talking to Patrick Seatman, the host of Vikings Now here at Chat Sports, and he was kind of telling me, I was like, I didn't see a bunch of Patrick Jones this year. And I know Panthers fans can't sit here and act like they've watched hours and hours and hours of Patrick Jones tape either because there hasn't been any with Carolina. So I was talking to him about his time in Minnesota, and he was telling me, Patrick Jones would get bullied on early downs. He was kind of a Brian Flores merchant in the way that he picked up sacks in 2024. He had 7 in that season, so a lot of those were kind of gift-wrapped for him based on the scheme that the defensive coordinator was running up there. So I think that Patrick Jones is a very replaceable name here, and when you could save $5 million, I'd have him on the chopping block. The big fish for Carolina this offseason in terms of cutting is going to be A'Shawn Robinson. Now, I know A'Shawn's got a lot of fans in the fan base here and on the team, the front office, all that stuff, but $10.5 million is just too much to keep on the roster if you could save that money by cutting him. It just makes all the sense in the world to separate from A'Shawn Robinson this offseason. That's not to say he's a bad player. I think he's fine. I think he's solid. 2.5 sacks in 2025. He can stop the run a little bit, but just when you consider how much money you could save and what the Panthers need to do, they need to cut A'Shawn Robinson. Like, there's not a lot of other things. There's not a lot of extension candidates on the roster. There's not a lot of trade candidates on the roster. There's not a lot of cut candidates that make as much money or would save as much money as A'Shawn Robinson does on this roster. So you got to cut ties with him. It would save a ton of money, and Joe Person at The Athletic thinks so too. He says the Panthers can't argue with Robinson's production since signing him 2 years ago. After tying the team lead with 5.5 sacks in 2024, that's embarrassing, by the way, Robinson finished among the top 10 defensive linemen in the league in run stops last season. But the Panthers already have a lot of money tied up along the defensive line after extending Brown and giving Tershawn Wharton a 3-year, $45 million contract last offseason. They also added Bobby Brown last year in free agency and need to see what they have in Cam Jackson, a 5th-round pick in 2025. Given Robinson's effectiveness in Carolina, the Panthers would be smart to try to trade him for a draft pick if they plan to cut him. That would be something that makes sense as well, because in the case of a trade, it would net the same cap savings that you would get if you ended up just cutting him. So they should peruse around the league and try to find a trade partner, but for the money that team would be taking on, I'm not so sure that it would be the most sound investment here, and Carolina's probably just going to end up cutting him at the end of the day, but you always make some calls first to try to work something out. Last up on the list, a guy we just mentioned in that quote, Bobby Brown III. Again, the Panthers don't have a lot of big money cap saving cuts that they can make for this roster right now. And just unfortunately, Bobby Brown is one of those guys that makes, over $4 million, or would save over $4 million here. And it would just make sense for Carolina to open up that money, because Bobby Brown just wasn't that good at the end of the day, guys. I know they added him last year in free agency, and you don't want to give up on a guy that quickly, but the guy couldn't even get on the field, man. Most of the games he was out there, he played 17 games, and couldn't even get 20 snaps in most of them. So I'm kind of out on Bobby Brown for the most part. In 2025, he was fine, but he had 5 total pressures, 13 stops, and that's pretty subjective. Sometimes PFF fluffs those numbers up a little bit. He had a 12% missed tackle rate, on the way to 4 missed tackles, only just 1 sack and 1 batted ball. He just wasn't doing anything, and for him to not to sit on the roster when you could save $4.5 million, it makes all the sense in the world to cut him. So I'm doing it. I'm honestly going to make all these moves. I would cut each and every one of these players that we've talked about on today's show. If you had to pick just one, though, who would you cut? Andy Dalton, drop his jersey number 14. Tommy Tremble, drop an 82. Patrick Jones, drop a 91. A'Shawn, what about a 94? And then Bobby Brown would be 97. Type any of those jersey numbers down in the comment section. Pick one that the Panthers should cut. All right, so to wrap up today's show, some NFL Cup candidates that I think could sign with Carolina potentially. If Alvin Kamara wanted to stay in the same region, same division, he could get cut by the Saints and end up being a Carolina Panther here. Because at this point in his career, I don't think he's a guy who's going to be doing every down workloads anymore. So go out there, be a nice compliment to Chuba Hubbard, and I think he could end up taking this Carolina Panthers offense to the next level. I'd be in favor of signing Alvin Kamara if he gets cut. Calvin Ridley is a name that could be cut as well due to an injury-riddled 2025 and just really lackluster overall performance in Tennessee there. I still think there's something in there with Calvin Ridley, so I'd be willing to take a flyer on him. Very cheap deal, I would assume, if he were to come to Carolina. Elton Jenkins of the Green Bay Packers at that center spot. He's a guy who would just save a good bit of cash for Green Bay there. His skill level is still really, really good. He's one of the better offensive linemen on that Packers unit, but it's the money that they would free up by cutting him could make him a surprise cut candidate here. And if the Panthers can't re-sign Cade Mays, I'd be all over bringing Elton Jenkins to Carolina. TJ Hawkinson's a name that I don't think is going to be, it's maybe a surprise to some, but if you really read between the tea leaves, the Vikings are the worst cap situation in all of football, and cutting TJ Hawkinson would free up like $15 to $20 million. So they have to go out there and do that. But I'd be all in favor of making him a Carolina Panther here, add another weapon to that offense to make Bryce Young's life a little bit easier, especially if you're going to cut Tommy Tremble as well. Rashawn Gary is the last name that we'll talk about here. Look, his play has dipped off a cliff for the past 3 years pretty much. Back in 2021, though, he was one of the highest graded pass rushers in all of football. So I'd be willing to see if there's something left in the tank there, see if he can rectify and resurrect his career here with Carolina. With that being said, name a player the Panthers should sign in free agency here. Who is your guy? Who do you think the Panthers need to sign on the open market? They got to make a bunch of those cuts, though, to get there first. Let me know who that is down in the comment section, as that will do it for today's show. YouTube.com/Panthers Today. Make sure you go down below, hit that subscribe button for free Panthers content all offseason long. We'll see you guys next time. And as always, keep pounding.